picture. You're not picking up. Mic check 1, 2. All right, so welcome to the Coronavirus COVID-19 conference hosted by the Brighton Seventh-day Adventist Church. As of today, March 15, questions answered. You may call in with your questions to our main hotline at 876-808-7943 or 876-385-0627 to answer live in the question and answer segment. You may also send questions via WhatsApp, text only, to 876-879-2153. That is, call in with your questions to our main hotline at 876-808-7943 or 876-385-0627 to answer live in the question and answer segment. Or you may send questions via WhatsApp text to 876-879-2153. Additionally, please note when referring to this conference on social media, you may use hashtag BSDA COVID-19 aware. Again, BSDA COVID-19 aware. Now, we'll turn over to our host pastor, Christopher Mighty, who will pray to begin our conference.
Shall we bow our heads for prayer? Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for having brought us safely here. We thank you for the privilege that we have to share with your people information that they need at this time about this COVID-19. I pray that you will calm our fears and help, Lord, that the information that we receive will help us to better understand how to protect ourselves. We ask that you will take charge, and may your grace and your mercy cover us. For this we ask in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, in January of this year, we received news of the outbreak of the coronavirus, otherwise called COVID-19. We have a very important program.
I am particularly thrilled to welcome you all here this afternoon, whether in the hall here or online. It's really a wonderful thing having you like this. This is like a dream come true. Word. Well, certainly we hope that after this evening, you will be even more enlightened to deal with your various situations. May God bless you all. I'm just going to ask now that we welcome our host, Dr. Sidian Brady, and she will take over from here.
Thank you. Coronavirus, COVID-19. What is it? It is a respiratory illness caused by the novel coronavirus, now categorized as a severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 or SARS-CoV-2. Why are we here? On the 11th of March, which was this past week, Wednesday, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Yesterday, which was the 14th of December at 10 a.m., World Health Organization put out advisory that 12 new territories have reported cases of coronavirus confirmed in the past 24 hours. That was between 10 a.m. on Friday morning and 10 a.m. yesterday morning. The Director General for the World Health Organization yesterday said that Europe has now become the epicenter of the pandemic, with more reported cases and deaths than the rest of the world combined, apart from China. Let me bring it down to you in terms of the situation as it relates to numbers. And this data is as at 10 a.m. yesterday morning. Total new cases in a 24-hour period between 10 a.m. on Friday morning and 10 a.m. on Saturday morning was, in the 24 hours confirmed, 142,539 confirmed cases, with 9,769 of these cases being new cases within the new cases within the 24-hour period. Total deaths attributed to the coronavirus disease, or SARS-CoV-2, was 5,392 deaths, with new cases being 432 new cases as at yesterday morning. China accounted for 81,021 confirmed cases and 3,194 deaths. All the other countries that have reported confirmed cases outside of China account for 61,518 confirmed cases, with 2,199 deaths. That's why we are here this afternoon. To date, 134 countries, territories, areas have reported confirmed cases of the COVID-19 disease. Let's bring it home. In Jamaica, the Ministry of Health and Wellness sent out a release this morning reporting 2 new confirmed cases of the COVID-19. This brings to a total of 10 the number of confirmed cases for Jamaica. To date, we have recorded both imported cases and we now have cases of a local spread. The idea for this conference was conceived by our Health Ministry Director in February, and then the health team and the leadership of our church began preparations to host this conference. We have been planning this event for just over 2 weeks and realized just Wednesday to Thursday of this week that the way we had planned to host this event was no longer possible. And so we had to go quickly to the drawing board to see how we could make it possible to disseminate this very important information while adhering to the government's recommendation of no large gatherings. And so we're here today live streaming with next to minimal in-studio audience, just a handful of us here. Because this information is very important and our goal of community awareness and preparedness must be achieved. It is my pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you those who will be speaking and also to share with you as we go through this conference. We will have a greeting from the Central Jamaica Conference, and then immediately following that, I will introduce to you our first presenter. Sister Henry.
Dr. Michelle Brown, Dr. Orville Heslop, host pastor, Pastor Christopher Mighty, Mr. Randall Williams, Dr. Sidonie Brady Brown, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen in the audience, online listeners, good evening. Firstly, I would like to bring you greetings from the administration of Central Jamaica Conference, namely our president, Pastor Levi Johnson, Pastor Neville Barrett, secretary, and Pastor Billy Watson, treasurer, other directors, and workers. The administration would like to commend Pastor Christopher Mighty and Mr. Randall Williams for taking this timely initiative to the fore. We believe that one of the most topical issues today is COVID-19, and the church has seen it fit to increase awareness, and for this we want to commend you. We want to also use this platform to appeal to all Jamaicans to become your brother's keeper during this national crisis. We are especially concerned for our elderlies, also persons living with pre-existing health conditions, and those who are shut in. As a country, as a conference, we also want you to know that we have activated our disaster committee and has earmarked $1 million to help manage the crisis. These funds can be accessed by our pastors. We continue to pray for our nation. And finally, as I leave, I just want to say to all Jamaicans that we should find something to laugh about. Pull out all those jokes, share them with your friends, your families, and remember that you can trust God with your health.
Thank you, Sister Henry. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our first presenter, Dr. Michelle Brown. Dr. Brown has a PhD degree in medical microbiology, as well as MBBS, that's Bachelor of Medicine and Surgery from the University of the West Indies, Mona. She has worked in the Department of Microbiology, specifically the Virology subsection at Mona in various capacities, including researcher. Her research interests have focused primarily on immunological, serological, and molecular studies of dengue and other arboviruses in Jamaica, as well as viral hepatitis, results of which have been published in peer-reviewed journals. She loves the Lord, most importantly, and she's also a member of the Meadowvale SDA Church. Dr. Brown, it is our pleasure to have you here sharing with us this afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure indeed to be here because indeed at this time we need reassurance, we need to be informed, we need to inform others, and we need to stay calm, especially in light of the fact that over the past week there has been new developments with regards to COVID-19 disease, both locally and right here in Jamaica, where we now have 10 confirmed cases of COVID-19 disease. I'll start by saying in recent times, we have experienced outbreaks from emerging and re-emerging viruses. We in Jamaica, we have had outbreaks of dengue, we have experienced outbreaks of chikungunya, and many Jamaicans still are feeling the effects. They still have joint pains, lingering joint pains from that outbreak that we had. We also had outbreaks at Zika virus, and many of us remember that pregnant women were warned not to become pregnant during that time. And yet again, now we are experiencing the emergence of another infectious virus, SARS-CoV-19, which is the cause of COVID-19. Now, this evening, I'm just going to remind us of some of the things that we may have read about, we may have heard about, just so that we're all on the same page, that we're aware of what is happening, and most importantly, we will take the steps that are necessary to protect ourselves, our families, to protect those who are more prone to becoming infected, and the community at large. Because after all, we are our brothers and our sisters' keeper. So just to outline my presentation, will be focused on, there are several areas that I'm going to be looking at just now. If I could have the next slide, please. All right, so first of all, I'm going to give you a brief background of coronaviruses. Then I'm going to introduce COVID-19 disease. I'm going to speak about the epidemiology of this disease, who gets it, how do they get it, and why do they get it. I'm going to be looking at how it is transmitted, because many persons are wondering, am I at risk? If I'm at risk, am I at high risk? Am I at a lower risk? How do I become infected? I'm going to be looking at the clinical features. Many persons want to know, I'm having a cough, I'm having a sore throat. Should I be worried? Is it that I'm getting COVID-19 disease? And I'm going to be looking most importantly at ways that we can prevent, control, and treat this disease. So coronaviruses have been with us for some time. Coronaviruses are a large family of viruses that are referred to as envelope RNA viruses. And most importantly, they are characterized by a halo or a crown-like appearance due to the protein spikes that surrounds the envelope of this protein. And these spikes are very important in initiating viral entry into host cell, which lead to subsequent respiratory diseases. There are common human coronaviruses, such as type 229E, NL63, OC43, HKU1, and all of these are responsible for causing mild to moderate upper respiratory tract infection, for example, the common cold. And many of us, we have common cold 2 to 3 times, even 4 times for the year. So we have, at some point, been infected by a coronavirus. The coronavirus is found in different species of animals, such as camels, cats, cattle, and bats. Animal coronaviruses, however, can infect human, though this happens very rarely. And when they do infect human, they can result in human-to-human transmission of the virus. Now, this is just showing a little picture of the coronavirus, showing it has an envelope, and there's an RNA which is in the center. That's just basically genetic material. And on the outside, we are seeing the spikes, protein spikes, which play a very important role in viral entry into the host cell. Now, the first reports of MERS was in 2012 in Saudi Arabia. The origin of this virus was in an animal, and it was thought to be the camel. An outbreak of this virus, MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, occurred in various countries. Clinically, this disease was characterized by a severe respiratory illness, and features of which included fever, cough, and shortness of breath. So in 2012, we had an outbreak of a coronavirus, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, CoV, or MERS-CoV for short. As a result of this outbreak, there were 2,506 cases, which resulted in 862 deaths. Prior to this, we had another outbreak that was caused by a coronavirus. This occurred in the years 2003 and maybe as early as 2002. It was known as Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, CoV, or SARS-CoV. Now, this outbreak spread to more than 24 countries in North America, South America, Europe, and Asia. It was thought that the intermediate host for this virus was the civet cats. Clinically, similar to MERS, the infection was characterized by fever, also a headache, body ache, atypical pneumonia, and mild respiratory symptoms. So far, we're seeing that members of these families that caused outbreak resulted in infection that had to do with the respiratory system. The respiratory system was a system that was mainly affected by these viruses. Now, SARS was responsible for 8,096 cases when we had that outbreak in 2003, and it resulted in 774 deaths, or 10% overall. Now, this is just to show you a picture of bats, and you might be wondering why bats. Bats are there because it is thought that these coronaviruses originated all in bats. So the MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, the SARS, and now SARS-CoV-2, which is the cause of COVID-19 disease, they are all thought to have originated in bats, from which they spread to some intermediate animals, and from there they infected man, resulting in human-to-human or person-to-person transmission of the virus. So we have a new infection, COVID-19, which came on the scene, so to speak, was a new kid on the block since December last year in Wuhan, China. What do we know about this disease? What do we know about the virus that causes this disease? We're going to look at the origin. Now, the cause of COVID-19 is thought to be SARS-CoV-2. That is severe acute respiratory syndrome, COVID-2. It is named as such because it is believed to be genetically linked to the same virus, coronavirus, that caused the SARS outbreak in 2002-2003. Now, this disease is caused by a virus which has a zoonotic disease, zoonotic origin, originates in animals, and it subsequently can spread to humans. The possible reservoir or intermediate hosts were thought to be snakes. This is one for the present COVID-19, and there have been other intermediate animals that have been postulated to be intermediate hosts. And I should point out that COVID-19 is relatively new. Research is ongoing, and as information is gathered, it will be shared. So there's a lot that is still left to be researched and to be known about this virus and its disease. Okay, so far there is no consistent evidence as to the real origin of COVID-19 disease in terms of how it got from the animals to human. However, it is thought that mammals and birds are main reservoirs, and I've included a reference for your information. May I have the next slide, please? So we're just going to look briefly at the timeline for COVID-19 disease. In late December 2019, there were a cluster of patients that were admitted to hospital in China, Wuhan to be specific, and they presented with pneumonia. The interesting thing about these patients was that they all had a common link in that they were all linked to seafood and wet animal wholesale market in Wuhan province in China. And it is thought from this that it is likely that this disease had a zoonotic origin. On December 18th to December 29th, 5 patients were hospitalized with acute respiratory distress syndrome. Of the 5, 1 patient died. December 2019, there was a first report of cases of COVID-19 disease. On January of this year, 41 patients that were admitted with COVID-19 infections were confirmed by laboratory testing as in fact having the virus and being infected with COVID-19, having COVID-19 disease. Interestingly, of these 44, less than half, had underlying illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. And this is so important because you will hear in the media, printed, and in the audio, you will hear that patients who have underlying illnesses, patients who have a weakened or compromised immune system are more prone to getting severe infections with this disease. So as you realize, my figures are outdated. This was as of March 13. And as you heard earlier by the moderator, these figures have changed, and we are currently daily, hourly, we can see new figures, new cases being added as more persons are tested and more persons are positive and or isolated. So we'll just move and skip the statistics here because these are no longer relevant. In terms of our new areas, as of March 13, there were 3 new areas. Today, as we heard, that number has certainly increased. So we'll move right along. Now, the World Health Organization did a risk assessment of the countries that were, or regions that were at high risk or high alert for infection. China was rated very high. At the regional level, there was a very high risk, and globally overall, the risk of infection is very, very high. Now, I thought this very interesting. Last week, when I checked the WHO website, it was said that as of March 9, and I keep saying that these figures no doubt have doubled by now, the WHO Operation Supply and Logistics supplied to 57 countries since the start of the outbreak 584,000 surgical masks, 47,000 N95 masks, 620,000 gloves, 72,000 gowns, and 11,000 goggles. These are all part of PPE, personal protective equipment, that are necessary if one were to attend to someone with the disease. If they are in the laboratory testing samples, they have to protect themselves. And these pieces of equipment are very, very important. And certainly our situation in Jamaica has changed. Notably, we have now recorded 10 confirmed cases of COVID-19 disease. So we'll move right along. And similarly, for Latin America and the Caribbean, figures have changed. There have been new cases, and if cases are diagnosed, they're added. So we'll just continue. We'll just skip this slide. And similarly, we will skip the slide. We'll go ahead. Okay, so the question is, how does one become infected with this virus, which subsequently lead to the disease? First of all, a portal of entry. How does the virus gain entry into our bodies? The virus gains entry via our mouth, the epithelium, the mucous membrane, our mouth, our nose, and our eyes. That is why we emphasize when you are coughing, when we're sneezing, cover our mouth, cover our nose. If we don't have tissue, we can use our flexed elbow. If we use tissue, we are encouraged to discard of them immediately after use. Now, person-to-person transmission is the main route of spread. And so it is advised that we should be at least 6 feet apart from each other. We should maintain a social distance from others so that whenever an infected person sneezes or cough, their droplet cannot come in contact with the mucous membrane of our nose or eyes or our mouth. Now, the droplets can also remain on surfaces. They can remain on our clothing. And that is why we have to ensure that we wash our hands, we wash our clothes, and generally we practice good respiratory and hand hygiene. Recent studies have shown that the virus can remain outside of the body, on fabric, on different surfaces, from 3 hours to 3 days. As I said before, studies are ongoing, so these time period will change. However, the fact is the virus can remain on surfaces, and we can always touch an infected surface, then use our dirty hands, touch our eyes, touch our mouth, touch our nose. That will result in spread and infection with the virus. Okay, and as I just mentioned, contact with an infected surface or object will result in infection. Now, the virus has been detected in urine, stool, and blood. And it is also said that there can be asymptomatic transmission. In other words, a person who is infected but have very mild disease or perhaps not showing any symptom at all can in fact shed the virus and transmit the virus to others. This is not usually the case, however, it can happen. And I have cited a reference there that was published since this year that showed that the virus was found in urine and stool of a patient that was infected. And the interesting thing is that this virus is highly transmissible. So let's say mommy has it and she goes home. She can easily infect daddy. Daddy can infect the children. If there are elderly persons there, they too can become infected. So the chain of infection goes on. So it is our duty to break this chain of infection by practicing good hand hygiene, washing our hands with soap and water. If our hands are not visible soil, we can use an alcohol-based sanitizer with 60 to 95% alcohol. But we have to be careful, we have to protect ourselves, we have to break the transmission cycle of this virus. Now, there are certain populations that are at high risk and some are even at higher risk. We're all susceptible. Why is that so? This is a new virus. So we're all susceptible because we do not have what we call immunity to this virus. However, there are some persons that are more susceptible or if they are infected, they will have more severe disease than other persons. Who are these persons, you might ask? One, persons who have traveled to an area with cases of COVID-19, and now we have it here. Or persons who have been in contact with somebody who is infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The elderly persons, they are more prone to getting severe disease. The age varies, but generally it's those who are 65 years or older. So we have to protect the elderly ones. We have to ensure that at home we don't have visitors trafficking in our homes to look for the elderly. We have to ensure that when we're going by their bedside or the caregivers take and practice good hand and respiratory hygiene, because the elderly persons are prone to becoming infected and having more severe disease than the younger persons. We have persons with underlying illnesses. So the persons who have hypertension, diabetes, heart or cardiovascular problems, and lung disease. Remember, the coronaviruses affect the respiratory tract, which includes the lung. So persons who smoke, persons who have underlying lung disease, they are prone to getting severe infection if they become infected. Persons with a weakened immune system, so those who are already ill, those who have poor nutrition, they are prone to getting severe diseases. And also the healthcare workers. Remember, persons who are sick, they need someone to care for them. Healthcare workers who look after the sick, they are at high risk of becoming infected. And you'd have heard on the news that many persons who attended to patients, they unfortunately succumbed to their infection with coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. Now, this is just to highlight some studies that have been done. So based on one study that has been done, it was shown that 6 to 41 days, with an average of 14 days, is a time period from the onset of illness to death in persons who died. It is also shown that the severity of disease depends on the age of the person and the person's immune status. The older the persons are, the more likely they are to become infected and become ill and have more severe disease. The duration of illness is shorter among older patients. So we really have to take care of our geriatric or older population because they're prone to getting more severe diseases. Another study that was done on infected patients in Wuhan, in this study, the majority were men, 73% were men. The average age of participants in this study was 49 years. The youngest person was 18 years old. Again, this highlights the point I made earlier. Persons with underlying diseases were at the highest risk. So persons with diabetes, 20% of them were infected. Hypertension, 15% were infected and had severe disease. Heart disease, 15%. So these are the patients that we have to pay particular attention to. These are the persons who need to get their medication, ensure that they avoid ill contacts, because if they were to become infected, they are prone to getting severe disease. And just to show another study, because as you realize, this is a novel virus, so new studies are being done. As studies are being done, results and data are being published. And we, in turn, we can educate ourselves based on these data. Another study that was done it looked at the clinical characteristics of 140 patients that were infected with SARS-CoV in China. In that study, they basically looked at a 1-to-1 male-to-female ratio. The average age of participants was 57 years, and these persons acquired the virus through the community. And they found that the most common clinical manifestation was fever. This was found in over 91% of patients. Cough was found in 75% of patients. GI symptoms such as diarrhea, which is one of the symptoms, was found in 39.6% of the study participants. And again, persons with hypertension and diabetes were found to have severe disease. So I'm not telling us anything new. This is things that we have heard already. It's just by way of reminder. So we move along right now. So the Chinese CDC also had some data published which show again that the variation of persons dying from infection varied with age. And it also showed that patients who were aged 10 to 19 years had the same chances of dying from the disease as patients in their 20s and 30s. And interestingly, in this study, they found that patients who were greater than 50 years had a higher fatality rate. And this is yet another study which is just showing symptoms that were present and underlying conditions. So I'll just gloss over this one. So what are the symptoms of COVID-19 disease? First of all, the incubation period is 2 to 3 days of exposure to up to 14 days, and with an average of about 5.7 days. This will vary, but this is on average what the incubation period is. What are the most common symptoms? Fever, cough, fatigue, you're just feeling lazy, lethargic, not feeling too well, and shortness of breath or difficulty breathing. Those are the main symptoms. There are other symptoms, however: aches and pain, nasal congestion, sore throat, and gastrointestinal symptoms such as diarrhea. You can also have headache, sputum production, hemoptysis, and lymphopenia. And you might ask, but some of these symptoms are symptoms of the common cold or symptoms of influenza. Why should I even become concerned? Now, in some cases, we can have severe disease. That is why we need to become concerned. Severe infections can lead to pneumonia, severe acute respiratory syndrome, kidney failure, and inevitably death. But we don't want it to get to that point. Overall, however, at the end of the day, it is said that 80% of infected persons will remain asymptomatic or have mild infection, and they will recover. So we can find some comfort in that statement, that not because I have corona, I become infected and have the disease, I'm going to die or I'm going to end up in ICU. Well, ICU and then die. No, 80% will have mild symptoms, 80% will recover. However, 15% will have severe infections that may require supplemental oxygen. 5% will have critical infections which will require ventilation support. But overall, 80%, this is what studies have shown, that at least 80% of persons will recover from this disease. Now, I'm winding down, and you might ask, is there any treatment? What can I do if I'm infected, you know? Currently, there are no vaccine. The vaccines, we're told, will take, on average, 12 to 18 months to be ready for use. As you know, with vaccine development, there has to be clinical trials, and it has to be proven that the vaccine are efficacious and very safe to be used in patients. Now, so currently there are no FDA-approved medication for infection with SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19 disease. So treatments, as with some other viral infections, are mainly supportive. What do I mean by supportive? So we're treating the symptoms. So if someone has a fever, we'll give them antipyretic, for example, Panadol, to aid the fever. If they're having aches and pain, they will get analgesics or painkillers because we're treating the symptoms. It is also suggested that persons who become infected, they get a lot of rest, they take a lot of fluid, so they do not become dehydrated. It is suggested in one source that for sore throat or cough, a room humidifier or hot showers can help. In severe cases, for example, those cases in which the patients have developed kidney failure, they may need organ support. They may need life support in order to sustain their lives. And as I said before, there's no available vaccine currently. It is said that vaccines will take 12 to 18 months before we can have a potential one ready for use. And I'll also emphasize that as new information is gained, it will be passed on, and we will update our knowledge. Now, most importantly, how can we prevent infection? This is what this talk is all about. We not only want to prevent the virus from coming into Portmore, we want to protect Jamaica. Yes, we have cases, but we can do our parts to prevent further spread of the virus and to prevent further cases from being recorded. because after all, it will affect the economy. Mothers will have to be staying home with the children, and overall, all sectors will be affected. Prevention is pretty much the same as influenza, and I'll emphasize, in terms of prevention, high on my list, frequent hand washing with soap and water. It is suggested that we wash our hands for at least 20 seconds, and we can time ourselves by singing the song Happy Birthday 2 times. That is roughly 20 seconds. If our hands are visibly soiled, we need to use soap and water. However, if there's no soap and running water, and our hands are not visibly soiled, we can use alcohol-based hand sanitizer to disinfect our hands. We should avoid contact with persons who are ill. And most importantly, stay home if we are not feeling well. I know some of us, we are committed to our job, we're committed to our patients, but if we're sick, stay home. Because you're going out, you're going to be infecting others, who in turn are going to be infecting others, so the cycle of transmission will continue. It is suggested that we maintain a social distance of at least 2 meters or 6 feet from a person who is sneezing or coughing. Why? Because if it's less than 2 feet or the 6 meters, 2 meters or 6 feet, the droplets can land on our nose, on our mouth, in our eyes, and we want to avoid being infected. So we're going to practice good respiratory hygiene. Whenever we're coughing or sneezing, we use tissue, discard of it immediately in the bin, or we cough in our flexed elbow. We want to prevent further transmission of the virus. And many of us were accustomed to fiddling with our eyes, taking off our glasses, touching our mouth, picking our noses. This is not wise. We have to learn to desist from these practices because we could easily touch an infected surface and transmit the virus to our eyes, and from our eyes or our nose, it can gain entry into our body. So if someone is experiencing fever, cough, difficulty breathing, they're asked to seek medical attention. In seeking medical attention, we advise that you call in advance. Please do not just turn up at the doctor's office. Even if it's your private doctor that you have known for many years, call in advance. That doctor has to make provisions for you. She has to get her necessary protective equipment. She has to get her mask, she has to get her gown, and she has to make plans so when you get there, you can be seen as quickly as possible and be out so that you do not infect other patients who might be waiting to seek medical attention. And in the office, around the home, I'm advised us all to clean and disinfect frequently touched objects. We can use our bleach or hydrogen peroxide or vinegar or 70% alcohol. Clean objects at home and at work, in our environment. Mothers, others in the home, we're encouraged to cook our meat and eggs thoroughly. I'm just showing you here brochures that the Ministry of Health have displayed. These are for our edification. We should read them. We should practice these procedures. These are simple procedures that should become a part of our everyday lives. And by so doing, we can do our part to protect ourselves, protect our families, and protect members of our communities. And this just shows us other measures that we can use to keep ourselves safe. And so what if we come in contact with somebody who is ill? We can self-quarantine, and as I said before, if we start experiencing severe symptoms, call our healthcare provider. Our healthcare provider will alert the ministries. The Ministry of Health and Wellness has issued hotline numbers. They have given us contact numbers that we can call. We can be assessed. We can be quarantined or isolated if necessary. The relevant samples can be taken off, sent to the lab, so we can have confirmation of cases of COVID-19 disease. This is when we're in our cars, we can sanitize the steering wheel, we can sanitize the seat belts, importantly our cell phone. I mean, we have our cell phone all over the place. We need to sanitize before we use, before we take them home. We do not want to transmit the virus. We want to disinfect and get rid of the virus as effectively as possible. And we can also add some disinfectant to our laundry. It is said that the virus can remain on our garments for a little while. so we need to disinfect. And I should point out that in colder climates, the virus can persist outside of the body for longer periods, while the virus is destroyed by heat, by sunshine. So we have to just keep those in mind. Again, these are things that we all know. We wash our hands on reaching home. We take off our clothes, leave them at the door, leave all our street clothes at the door, sanitize objects that we take home from work or from school. Anyone, visitor coming to your house, don't be afraid. Offer them some hand sanitizer at the door so they can disinfect their hands before entering your home. And I'm winding down now. And again, we can boost our immune system, which Dr. Heslop is going to talk about shortly. We should practice having a balanced diet. We should include our fruits and our vegetables because, after all, we need to boost our immune system. Now, I had this right there just to remind us that not everyone needs to be wearing masks. Well, we can't even get the mask to buy anyway. But it's usually to protect those who are ill, to protect them from sneezing and coughing and therefore spreading the virus. But there are some situations where it is inevitable that we need to protect ourselves and to wear our mask. And again, this just points out that if you're ill, stay at home. And just a note to employers that perhaps you need to consider situations where workers can work on a shift system or workers can be allowed to stay home if they are ill, maybe work from home so that they can not come to work if they are ill with the risk of spreading the virus to those who are well. And these slides just continue to show us how we can implement measures at work that will reduce the spread of SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID-19 disease. All right, so I continue. And this had to do with persons who are in a laboratory setting that need to protect themselves from samples that they're working with that contain the virus. So I just skip along here. So we just move right along. And some persons might ask, so what's the difference between COVID and influenza? Some signs and symptoms are similar, however, some are different. And as we see, fever and cough can characterize both. There can be headaches as well, because they both affect the respiratory system. However, there are some symptoms and signs in COVID-D that are more severe than influenza, but both can cause death, and we need to remember that. And that is why there's a yearly vaccine for influenza. So we move right ahead. So COVID-19 causes a more severe disease due to lack of immunity. This virus is novel, this disease is novel, so there's lack of immunity. All right, and as a result of a lack of immunity, there is increased susceptibility. So more of us are prone to getting the disease because it was never here before. So our bodies have not built up immunity or antibodies against this virus. And as a people, as Jamaicans, the Ministry of Health has put in various measures to protect us. And I'm going to encourage us all to go to the website, become informed, put these practices in place to keep ourselves safe. Because whatever affects one affects all. If one person is affected, after a while, if we're not careful, that one person will transmit the virus to others, and it will affect a large portion of the population, and we will get to the point where we're at now. I thank you very much, and I'll just say, whatever you do, keep safe, keep yourself safe, keep your family members safe, especially the elderly who are unable to take care of themselves. We have to look out for them and to our children. It is said that the mortality rate is about 2.4% for COVID-D. It may be higher. The overall, however, 80% of persons who are infected will recover, but we have to think about the 15% and the 5% who will become severely ill and may inevitably die. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown, for all that information. We will be taking questions later on in the program. We're just going to move right ahead to our second presenter, and that is Dr. Orville Heslop. Dr. Orville Heslop is a consultant medical microbiologist for several years. He has 17 peer-reviewed journal articles and more than 13 peer-reviewed abstracts. His specialty is molecular epidemiology of HIV-1 subtypes, susceptibility pattern of several gram-negative bacteria, as well as the investigation of environmental molds and their remediation from indoor buildings contaminated with high mold growth. Presently, he is the operations manager for Mold Remediation and Restoration Services Limited. Dr. Heslop, it is our pleasure to have you to share with us this afternoon, and we look forward to learning more from the information that you will provide for us.
It's a pleasure being here. It's a good feeling to be among brethren and friends. And Dr. Brown has covered so much, it's difficult not to overlap. So you'll have to bear with me. I don't have too many slides, and probably you'll be overjoyed that I won't be here for too long. I guess it's every man's business that this COVID-19, because of the nature of the virus, then all of us have to get involved. And you're responsible for to a great extent, your own health. Okay, I'm just going to ask that you change the slide when I do this. Don't think that I have some sort of illness. All right? But the virus, all these viruses, respiratory viruses, they are quite similar in that they have these projections, which Dr. Brown mentioned. These glycoprotein projections are really responsible for attachment to cells, epithelial cells in the throat, the nose, and in the lung. And once they attach to these, they can enter, and then they disrupt those cells, they move on to affect others. And once it's in the lung, that's the time you're going to develop difficulty in breathing. Okay? So all these viruses are actually quite similar. They are different genetically. Okay? And so the E229, the O43, the big difference is that they are genetically different. You'll find that there are differences also in the clinical pictures that they present. They will all present these upper respiratory tract, which may be mild, but then some of these, they rapidly progress to the lung, and that's the time you have severe lower respiratory tract infection. I don't think they're okay. You've seen that already with all these projections, and not only the respiratory viruses that have these projections, but you also have dengue and all these other viruses, and they all as a result of attachment. Okay, now next slide, please. And that was taken recently for those who can see the COVID, the image of the new coronavirus. In fact, recently it has been reported that there are actually 2 strains of the virus. And we must remember that they are still investigating. It's an ongoing investigation. To begin in December, we are still early. And so much more has to be done before we can make a definitive call on these SARS and rest of viruses. The coronavirus has been around for several years or decades. And the earlier ones, they would cause very mild infection, flu-like symptoms. And then when we come to other coronaviruses like SARS, like MERS, and now the COVID-19, then you find that there are some subtle differences, and where the great difference is with the respiratory, lower respiratory tract infection. Next slide, please. A recent discovery, as I mentioned before, of these two strains, and one, we do not know which one actually causes a mild infection, but what we do know is that they progress rapidly, all right, and have a 50% predilection for the epithelial cells of the lung, and hence difficulty in breathing. This is an old slide which shows you the statistics. This was at the end of March 7, so I don't need to go over that, but at that time we just had 0 case in Jamaica, okay? In January 1 to 20, Wuhan, China, there were like 99 people with confirmed 2019 COVID pneumonia. And these had, and 75% of these had evidence of bilateral pneumonia. Next slide, please. Okay, some of the differences with OC43 and 229E as compared to COVID-19. Structurally, morphologically, they resemble. They're the same. But I said that genetically, there's a different makeup. And once you have any organism that appear for the first time on the scene, you're going to have a difficulty in understanding what is happening. You'll have a difficulty in treating. In fact, not many viral infections can be treated with antiviral drugs except for the herpes group of viruses. Same thing with bacteria. You have to spend a lot of time. And to have a vaccine ready, we have what we call a clinical trial, which can take from 12 months to 18 months. Why do you think they don't have a vaccine now for HIV/AIDS? Because the genetical makeup is so high, it keeps changing. The mutation is so rapid. And once this is why you have to treat HIV/AIDS patients with 3 different antivirals. Okay? So it becomes quite difficult to prepare this vaccine. Animal model, and also people who will volunteer and watch them over a long period of time. Okay? The distribution of these coronaviruses, the earlier one, they're worldwide. And to date, it's much more than 80 countries that are infected with the COVID-19. Okay? The incidence of infection is usually during the cooler months, all right, in December and early spring, right? Could I have the next slide, please? The incubation period is very important. If it's a short incubation period, you know you can control the spread of the virus. For example, OC43, the incubation period is just about 3 to 4 days, okay? And the same for the 229E. But with COVID, it's 2 to 14 days. And we have had cases where you find the incubation period up to 19, 20, or 24 days. WHO said it may be as a result of reinfection, okay? When the upper respiratory tract is infected, it's usually flu-like symptoms, coughing, and sometimes sneezing. And may I say, because this is so important as it relates to transmission and how you can prevent it, it's not only coughing and sneezing, but we have some aggressive speakers. They shout, and then they expel this virus. And they linger in the air for about 6 feet, then they land on some surface. Okay? So be aware of that. We ought to be a little more calmer in our nature. Okay. Outbreaks. With OC43, there was we had a neonatal clinic outbreak, but only occasionally you will have epidemics from these viruses. Another slide, please. Next slide. Okay. The mortality rate of the COVID, we have a 3.4% mortality rate estimated by the WHO as of March 3. And then we have a mortality rate in China, where it originated, about 3.8 nationwide and 5.8 in Wuhan. Okay? And I'm hoping that in Jamaica, where we have just started seeing cases, I believe that as the summer months approach, when it gets hotter, then we'll have fewer cases. All these data that you have been getting are data from these temperate climates where it's wet, it's cold, and these viruses will live for a longer time. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Now, I mentioned before that Wuhan, where you have the novel coronavirus, it's about a 2% death rate. SARS was 9.6, and I believe the reason for this is because of the short incubation period, and it presents quite severe symptoms of the lower respiratory tract. MERS, that's Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, was like 34% death rate. It was more restricted to the Middle East and all the surrounding countries there. Swine flu, only 0.02%, and it's really remained among swines. But somehow you might have that occasional infection into human beings. Because we do not understand viruses, I do believe that there should be a demarcation of what we eat. Okay, I don't believe that a man's stomach should be the graveyard of every imaginable carcass. There are some people that they eat anything that moves. You must draw the line somewhere. And I'm not saying this because of eating these, that's why we have all these problems now. But certainly it contributes to diseases. Dr. Brown had mentioned that extremes of age, the very young and the very old are most susceptible. Debilitating diseases, which can be the result of lifestyle-related or hereditary-related or exposure to harmful substances. Substance abuse, they all suppress the immune system. Unhealthy lifestyle, they suppress the immune system. Autoimmune diseases, those who are on anti-cancer drugs will all have a suppressed immune system. Doesn't mean that people who with a competent immune system is not at risk as well. Okay, and again I'll mention, health is in your own hand. Where lifestyle is concerned and the abuse of drugs of different sorts. And those people, the reason why the immune system is suppressed over many years, you're subject to so many different stimuli that affect your immune system. Next slide, please. Okay, some healthy ways to strengthen your immune system, which you can do for yourself. Don't smoke, and I will not say that you can do it moderately. Don't smoke or drink. Eat a diet that is high in fruits and vegetables, high fiber diets. Exercise regularly. Maintain a healthy weight. Some time ago I was like 221, Now I'm under 200, okay? You have to get adequate sleep, and I'm guilty of that. You have to take steps to avoid infections such as mentioned, washing off your hands frequently, cooking meats thoroughly, and also washing your vegetables. I must say that in Jamaica, we don't have a problem in cooking our meats thoroughly. There are people who still believe in what we call rare meat, sushi, and all that stuff. And most importantly, trust in God, okay? Because when you have a connection with God, He will direct you as how you should live. And this is why the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they've had this new start. It's an acronym for N, nutrition, E, exercise, W, enough water, S, sunshine, we have a lot of that in Jamaica, T, temperance, A, air, R, rest, and T, trust in God. A lot of these things you don't have to spend money. Okay, it is free to you. All right, some of the antioxidant vegetables and fruit that we can have. I list them. Broccoli. It's expensive, but it's a good anticoagulant, antioxidant. Brussels sprouts, spinach, kale, garlic. And I think the two most important ones among these is your kale and your garlic. Garlic can be used for so many health reasons, even as an antibiotic. Fruits, berries, and then plum. Plum is very important as an anticoagulant. Next slide, please. Okay, you also have your NAC, that's N-acetylcysteine, which was reported in the New England Journal. This actually helps to raise glutathione levels, and your glutathione is actually an anticoagulant. It is also helpful in completing restoration of the natural killer cells. These cells help in fighting diseases, okay? And also high levels of your NAC in your body may also suppress the HIV reproduction, HIV-1. Okay, a scientific approach to improving the immune system or boosting the immune system is what we refer to as cognitive fitness, okay? The mind, okay? And has to do with how you think, your thought process, how you plan. And this can be helped when you have optimal nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, social interaction. There are some of us who do not really socialize too much, and some of us do not smile at all. And if you try it, you hear cracks in the jawbone. I'm going to ask you just to be, more sociable. Even if you don't want to talk, give a smile, okay? Sleep, very important, and practice stimulating activities. It's good to join a women's club or a men's club, but more importantly, come to church. They are your best family, all right? And then the use of supplements, which may include vitamins, multivitamins, zinc, important, because zinc decreases the risk of age-related chronic diseases, okay? Magnesium, I have that on my shelf. It helps in healthy bone formation and the lower risk of type 2 diabetes. Omega-3, a lot of us have heard of omega-3. Okay, and the use, this one is not available in Jamaica. We refer to it as the autogenous lymphocytic factor, ALF. This sort of treatment you'll find only in Dallas, Texas, at this Environmental Health and Immunology Center, which I've visited. My brother-in-law worked there for many years and actually developed this autogenous lymphocytic factor. Simply, what is done is that you take all the white cells from the patient, you sonicate or break up these cells after they have grown in tissue culture, and then you concentrate all the amino acid and then inject this back into the body. And it helps to boost the immune system. And thousands of Americans have been treated with this autogenous lymphocytic factor. It's only a pity we don't have it here. Okay, the use of stem cells. This have been, they have been investigating this for quite a long time, but it's a modulator of the immune system, all right? And so as to shut off pathological responses while preserving its ability to fight off disease. Next slide. Or is it that the last one? That's the last one. Thank heavens. Okay, thank you very much. And I hope that the questions that you will all throw at us will be able to answer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hessler. Now we'll go on to our next set of presenters, and that would be our final set of presenters for this afternoon. And these young ladies are very qualified to present to us on the financial impact that the coronavirus can have on us. They are Ms. Thesia Kelly and Mrs. Tanika White-Grooves. They are members of the Brayton Seventh-day Adventist Church. Ms. Kelly is a tax accountant, where she has a BSc, that is a Bachelor and a Master of Science degree in accounts. And Ms. Grooves is a financial controller for a prominent organization in our country, and she too has a Bachelor of Science degree, as well as the ACCA in accounts. So we invite these ladies to come and to share with us the financial perspective that the COVID virus is having both on us as individuals and also as a country.
All right, good night. My name is Tanika.
And my name is Thesia Kelly.
All right, tonight we will be just, as Sidney said, that we'll be talking about the financial effects of COVID on Jamaica, a very brief presentation. Since December 2009, the outbreak of COVID has spread from China to many parts of the world, including Jamaica. Many businesses and governments are assessing the operational and financial impact that this will have on both their business and their countries, and Jamaica is no different.
We have seen responses from several sectors of our economy, including public, corporate, academia, and even religious entities, suggesting wide-scale impact on our country and no doubt on our citizens. In this presentation, our views will be limited to personal and household effects, the effects on the Jamaican economy, what we can do to help, and lastly, to give us some hope.
Right, so we'll move on to the personal effects. We're already seeing increased demand on sanitary and personal cleaning supplies. We're seeing persons buying additional groceries, doing panic shopping, spending a lot of money trying to stock up because they're worried that we'll have a shortage, and some because they're worried that they'll have to be in isolation.
There is also likely to be increased utility bills as people are working from home, children are home for the next 2 weeks, so that's increased TV time and whatever else kids do with electricity.
Right. We're already seeing persons increasing the prices of the different items. Say for instance, you were buying Lysol for like $1,000 a couple of weeks ago, right now you're probably gonna have to pay like $2,000 to get it.
But the government has also indicated that we should let them know and be aware through consumer affairs if we see this happening, because, I mean, it's unconscionable that you would raise the prices at a time like this.
Right. It's also possible that depending on how the virus spreads and how long we have it in the country, we'll have a decrease in income for both employees and employers, and even for some of our small businesses. For some persons, we know that some persons are paid based on time. They go to work based on day and hours, and so they'll also be affected because they may not be able to go to work because they'll be maybe in communities that are isolated, or they themselves would have to be isolated at home. Some of their companies will be probably closing down for a period of time, and so on.
Now we move to the economic effects. Firstly, there's likely to be decreased income for the tourism, entertainment, and transportation industries as a result of travel restrictions, cancellation or postponement of income-generating activities, as we have seen. Champs has been cancelled, parties or carnival, you name it, as well as the closure of schools and businesses. If people are going out less, then they'll need transportation less, which means a decline in that sector.
And increased on public resources, or hospitals are getting more demand. They'll need more equipment or more supplies, and even in the news we are seeing theft.
There will also be increased demand on public resources through the need of security forces at quarantine sites and communities. And if people are working longer hours, then it means more pay, and that's also a cost to be considered.
Right. Reduced investment activities. We're even seeing right now that Proven has postponed their APO that they were advertising recently, and a possible delay in the listing of Trans-Jamaican Highway IPO. We are also thinking that if it extends to a certain time, we'll see a slowdown of investments. Interest rates will probably be affected. Stock prices will also start to slump.
But what can you do to help? Firstly, follow directives of government agencies by trying to keep abreast of information given, whether through their Twitter accounts, Facebook, whether you're watching the news or radio. Just try to keep informed.
Right, and that thesis is very important. I just wanted to add, because that will help us partnering with the government and keeping abreast and doing as we're instructed will kind of help to reduce the spread of the disease and the time period that it will be in our country.
We can also try to discuss flexible working arrangements with our employers. Some employers are open to you working from home, as well as reducing the actual number of days you go to work by working longer hours for the days that you are there, so that total productivity, for the whole country is not generally affected.
Right. We also have to, schools are being closed for 2 weeks, so the kids will be home for a while, and some of them will be watching TV, playing games, and doing all sorts of things, increasing the electricity bill. Didn't hear that, Sidian, but right. So we're encouraging persons to have their children, and washing their hands a little bit more frequently, using more water, more soap, and so forth. So we're encouraging parents to have their children do more outdoor play and follow their kids to the bathroom so that they can use the resources a little bit more efficiently.
This one is very, very, very important. Manage funds available and avoid increasing debt. Right. So a lot of people would have had their rainy day savings put aside. Notwithstanding that this is a very serious time, don't use it unless absolutely necessary. Don't panic buy and then run up the credit card bill, because after all of this, you're still going to have to pay that bill. Be disciplined in the usage of food and other products at home. I've seen online many persons are saying that they've bought their quarantine snacks and they've already eaten half of them. Try to contain yourself and not go overboard. Try to make homemade hand sanitizers or use alcohol, which most households would have already had. That is also a cost-effective measure.
Right, but there is hope, and we have received assurance from the minister that based on the reduction in the debt to GDP ratio, we have a little wiggle room for the demands that are being placed on the government at this time. Apart from the $7 billion that they've allocated for this emergency, they're saying that they can handle a little bit more.
Companies have pledged money and goods to assist in dealing with this virus, and at the beginning of the program, the representative from Central Jamaica Conference indicated that they have allocated $1 million in the fight against corona. Also, the manufacturing industry has given us assurance that they will be able to provide up to 3 months' supply of goods should it come to that.
Right, and the government has provided free websites and free phone lines, so we don't need credit from Digicel or Flow. If we need medical assistance or we need help or we need information, these facilities are free.
There are free resources available to keep children focused on their studies, especially PEP students. A company called EduFocal has opened their websites to students in grades 4 to 6 so that they can keep in tune with their studies while they are at home. And also, the disruption in overseas supply chains will more likely see more use of local produce. We've always heard to buy Jamaica, build Jamaica, so now is a good time for us to support our Jamaican manufacturers as they help us in the fight against corona.
Right, and I believe that we're being forced to do that too, because I know that on I think it was Friday, Minot was like flooded with persons trying to purchase their supplies. All right, friends, God is still in control. 2 Timothy 1, verse 7 says, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind."
Psalm 46, verse 1 says, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." And Philippians 4, verse 19 also says, "But my God shall supply all our needs according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus."
Right, so we're imploring you to stay safe, healthy, and fiscally responsible. God bless you.
Very good presentation, ladies. So we have gotten the information on the illness. We have gotten information on the virus. We've gotten information on protecting ourselves and protecting each other. We have gotten information on things we can do to optimize our immunological capacity and our defense system. At this time, I'm going to invite the members of the panel to come onto the stage as we answer some of the questions that have been sent in online. And if we have any questions from those of us that are present, we'll be able to address them so that we can provide all the information that is needed. Members of the panel. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for making yourselves available to address the questions that we have received. Now, so far, we have questions coming in. We have 4 questions that have come in. And as I said, we will also take questions from the audience or the small gathering that we have here. The first question that has come in is, after recovering from the virus, can an individual have a relapse? I'm not sure who this question is from, but it came in, and it's a good question, especially in light of our experience with the CHIKV and the Zika virus. This person is asking, is it possible to have a relapse? Difficult question at this time, but I'll ask any one of my panel members who are willing to take it.
Well, that is in fact a difficult question. And I'm not sure we are in a position to give a definitive response. I mean, it is still new, it is relatively new. As patients become ill and recover, we'll gain more information. So I really can't say definitively that there won't be a relapse. We have to see clinically how the disease progresses and how patients, the outcome of patients after they have recovered from this disease. I don't know if anybody else has a different perspective.
It will take a while before we can know whether there will be a relapse or not. In some cases, a lot of viruses, what we have is a reactivation, as with the herpes. Years after, you might get shingles, okay? In some cases, like with malaria, all right, where you can have a relapse depending on the type that you're infected. So it's relatively new, and we still have to wait and see, whether this will be one of the characteristic features.
Thank you, doctors. And that is true because we've seen that with the varicella, later on, patients have come in with shingles, with the herpes. The frequency of recurrence is a lot of times affected by the immunological capacity or strength of the individual. And so at this stage, so early in COVID-19, it's a good question, but unfortunately, it's not a question we're able to adequately answer. Now, another question that came in is having epilepsy a risk factor for contracting the COVID-19 virus? That was the question. Is having epilepsy a risk factor for contracting the COVID-19 virus? Any takers?
Still early stage. I can see that these questioners are really thinking.
Yes.
Right? But we're not sure about this particular illness, whether it actually causes a problem with your coronavirus infection.
Anything to add? Anybody else?
Well, so far, from what I've seen in the literature, I have not come across any study that commented on this group of patients. But certainly I would say for them, the caregivers of these patients, if applicable, should take necessary precaution that if they're having a seizure, they're adequately protected and they're kept safe. Mm-hmm. But as far as I know, I've not seen the literature where this group was singled out. But I think general precaution should be applied to these patients.
Okay. And I think the question was asked in light of the fact that it is a chronic illness. So persons, once they hear that if you have a chronic illness, you're at increased risk, that would likely, be the stimulant for somebody asking a question like this. And it's a fair question. It's a fair question, but we don't have any data at this time. The next question that was asked is, how does one distinguish between influenza and COVID-19? We touched on it a little bit, but maybe we can go over it for emphasis because, persons having the common cold and flu are home not sure what to do, so we can go over this information. How does one distinguish between influenza and COVID-19?
Okay, so with regards to COVID-19 disease, there's a case definition. So while you may have some symptoms that are similar, like the fever and the cough, we have to consider the patient's travel history as well. Was a patient, so apart from the symptoms, we have to consider the patient's travel history. Did the patient travel to an area in which there was an outbreak of the disease? Was the patient in contact with someone who had the disease? Because that would put them at higher risk. For COVID-19 disease, we see where it can affect the kidneys. You can have severe organ damage. You can have respiratory failure, breathing difficulties. These are some symptoms that might not necessarily be characteristic of influenza. But I would say there's a case definition that has to be used and not just the symptoms. We have to look at the entire picture, including the patient's travel history.
All right. Anything else to add?
Like HIV, your influenza virus, it has a high genetic variation. Okay, and it's also difficult once we have a strain. And I guess we have covered a lot of these strains that have been out and about through CDC, etc. But because of the high genetic variation, it can also pose a difficulty. We are not too sure whether we're going to have a variation with the COVID-19. Still early days, and we just have to wait and see.
All right. So that was the answer to the question, how can one distinguish between influenza and COVID-19? And the truth is that in the early periods, it may be very difficult. But that's why we have to practice the hygiene, the source protection as it relates to covering your coughs and sneeze as best as possible, sanitizing frequently touched areas, staying at home, or isolating yourself if you find that you are unwell. If we don't practice these things that came out in our presentation this afternoon, then in the initial stages you don't know the difference, but just in case it is COVID-19, then the risk is far greater if we don't practice the things that we should practice.
Sorry, and if I may just add, and we also need to remember that we have had influenza outbreaks yearly, yes, or a little more frequently, or less frequently. The thing is that COVID-19 is relatively new. Persons are more susceptible to getting it. There's no herd immunity, as we'll see with other diseases like dengue that is endemic in Jamaica. So we have to be on the alert. So if someone has a cough that's persisting, if they develop shortness of breath or severe difficulty breathing, that's a little more than just the flu. On a background of recent travel to an endemic area, or not an endemic area, an area in which there are cases that will alert us that this is not just a common, this is not just a regular seasonal flu. So we have to be aware and attuned to the symptoms and how long they persist for.
Correct.
May I also add that in the 1920, 1918-20, during World War I, when you had the first appearance of influenza virus, it actually killed more persons than World War I. Okay, millions died. I guess we are probably just experiencing this in our time and just don't know how to deal with it, that some of us have become actual hermits in our homes because we do not understand truly the nature of this virus.
Thank you, Dr. Hislop. Another question that came in from one of our online viewers was, why do they say sneeze or cough in your sleeve if the virus can remain on clothing for extended periods? Why are we encouraging that?
So the encouragement is to sneeze or cough in your elbow, the fold of your elbow, because it's an area that is not usually exposed. So you sneeze or cough in your elbow. You can wash at an appropriate time, but it's because it's an area that is not usually exposed. Therefore, person-to-person contact is a little less than with the hands that you use to do everyday, daily things. So that is why that advice is given. And it is not what is preferred. We would prefer even if you cough in your hands, that you wash frequently, and if you use a tissue, to discard it immediately. So those are other methods that you can use as well.
I would advise that people take extra napkins with them.
True.
To sneeze in, because I really don't agree that you should sneeze in your clothes and then wash it after. So now that we are aware of the nature of this particular virus, you just need to take some extra napkins with us, along with your hand sanitizer. Okay? Okay. In fact, there's a good practice coming out of China, where a Jamaican actually has suggested that you take off your shoe before you enter your house. Mm-hmm. Okay? And there's nothing wrong in putting up a sign there. You won't be seen as weird. And also to have your hand sanitizer posted there. I think we should also practice this.
Thank you, Doc.
Just today I was asked by my sister, why is it there's a run on our supermarkets for paper towel and tissues? So I said, because of the messaging that we're putting out, that you should catch your cough and your sneeze, and preferably using tissue. And it's important that we don't hold that tissue in our hands. We put it in a garbage bin immediately after.
All right. Thanks for the excellent answers. And also, if we consider the nature of viral spread, it's the respiratory droplets. So if for whatever reason you don't have tissue or paper towel or hand towel, if you cover, then you decrease the extent of the larger droplets, even more than the smaller one, the extent to which it will go out. So it's a way of containing the source of the virus closer to yourself or closer to your body and decreasing risk of spread to others. I'm asking if there are any questions among our small audience this afternoon. Yes, we do. Go ahead.
Thank you. This question is for Ms. Henry. You presented from Central Jamaica Conference, right? Okay. I know the Adventist fraternity would have made some tangible contribution already, but in terms of Central Jamaica Conference, where do we see ourselves? Is there anything in terms of whether for the members or for the general public, where do we see ourselves in terms of this COVID-19?
I did share earlier that we have activated our disaster preparedness committee and have earmarked $1 million towards managing the crisis. These monies can be accessed by our pastors who will be made aware through their own local crisis committees where the needs are, and they can tap in and access these funds.
All right. We have another question from the audience, and then we'll take some more online questions, and then we'll take more questions from the audience. Go ahead.
My question is, what has the conference put in place if the government should say no meeting on Saturdays?
No church.
What's the conference thinking that question? No church on Saturdays. What would we do?
Sure. So it's an all-of-government approach, and that includes all our churches, which met with the government just last Thursday, and they were given guidelines, which they're following, and the churches are on guard. They're listening for the next bulletin from the government, which if they should say, close all churches, we are working together with government in managing this crisis, and we will implement immediately as we are asked.
All right. I'm going to take about 2 more questions online before we go to more in-studio questions. So the next question was, how does the current practice of wearing gloves impact the spreading or contracting of COVID-19? How does the current practice of wearing gloves impact the spreading or contracting of COVID-19?
All right, I'll just comment on that very quickly. I've seen like regular individuals on the road wearing gloves, but we have to be careful because there's a technique to taking off these gloves, right? And if the gloves are infected, for example, and the gloves are not taken off the right way, the correct way, you can infect your hands, and then you can go and put your hands in your eyes, your mucous membrane, and you become infected. So it's not just about wearing the gloves. We have to know, we have to be educated about the proper way of taking off these gloves, because if the gloves are infected, we can, if the gloves are not taken off properly, infect our hands and subsequently infect our eyes. So we have to be careful. And this will further spread the virus.
Thank you.
Sometimes gloves can give us the idea of cleanliness and not really actually be clean. If we wear gloves all day, every day, use it and touch all surfaces for the regular layman, then your gloves are not clean. If they're not discarded frequently, then they become unclean. And so it's important for us to not use something that will only give us an idea of cleanliness, but actually be clean. So sometimes it may be better for the layman to actually just wash your hands frequently instead of wearing a glove every day.
That's true. All right. Another question says, would you advise persons in high-risk groups to self-quarantine? Would you advise persons in high-risk groups to self-quarantine? Very good question.
Well, my answer to that would be, since they are prone to getting severe disease, I would say as much as possible, limit yourself from social interactions. limit yourself from contact persons, persons who are ill, persons who traveled to the areas where there are outbreaks, and practice good respiratory and hand hygiene. Because the important thing is that you want to protect yourself. So self-quarantine is usually for persons who have reason or were exposed to persons who are infected, or they have come in contact with them or traveled to areas where infections were. So for the regular person with just the underlying illness, I would say practice good measures and limit your social interactions as much as possible, which in itself is isolating yourself.
Yes, Dr. Brown, thank you.
You know, we are calling on our people to be our brother's keeper. But as it relates to one high-risk group, which is the elderly, those of us who are going to reach out to help them must bear in mind that we must be in a state of health. So if we are feeling unwell, try not to go around the elderly, because then we're going to put them at increased risk.
That's true. Okay. So at this time, I'll take some more questions from our in-studio audience.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
In following up with the question of wearing gloves, I am now asking how effective are the use of masks, wearing masks, in the control of the virus?
How effective is wearing masks in terms of controlling the virus?
I think it's very important, and you must know the type of mask that you're purchasing. The N95 is recommended. Unfortunately, we can't get too many of those because Jamaica has run out. And what was ironical is when China was actually appealing to Trinidad and Jamaica to send them some masks. And they are the main producer of masks, like 1 million per day, all right? They do have this surgeon mask, which is not as effective as the N95. But I imagine if you use 2, it will be helpful. They also have the N100, which will keep out even smaller particles.
The P100.
All right? P100. Okay. So if you have masks at home, don't waste them. I don't want to advise you to use a mask over and over again, but it's very important, possibly even more important than a glove. Okay?
Okay. Any other comments on the mask?
I am also thinking that in case of an emergency where a person is drowning and you have to give the person CPR, how do you handle a situation like that? What should you do? As a person want to give CPR to the person, what do you do in protecting yourself?
Well, in terms of CPR, I'll attempt to answer. For persons, when we're giving CPR, it's in general, there is always some caution in doing mouth-to-mouth, especially if that person is a stranger, even without this, this development of coronavirus. And sometimes room is given for, our CPR will include chest compressions and breaths. There is room given for just chest compressions only, instead of going ahead and giving breaths. But as individuals who are very health conscious and very aware, and we all should be very equipped to handle CPR, there is actually masks that are available at certain health supply stores that you can actually get. So you don't have contact with the person's, your mouth to the person's mouth, so you can actually buy those masks. They're pretty cost effective, so everybody can actually get those masks. You can hit up a health supply store and see if you can have access to those, so you can have it available in the case of such an emergency.
Yeah, I just want to endorse that there are barriers that you can actually use to prevent direct contact of your mouth to the person's mouth if you're giving rescue breath. So there are devices that can be used, barrier methods.
Barrier devices. All right. I'll take one more question from our audience.
Good night, again, everyone.
My question is pertaining to the China thing where the shoes is concerned. I'm concerned about the entire garment for person who is like traveling day to day on the bus, in the taxis and so forth. Why just the shoes alone? What about your entire garment? When I come off the taxi or so and I leave my shoes, I'm still entering the house in my clothes. What do I do about that one?
In fact, when you listen to the testimonial coming out of China, it's not just the shoe. It is the entire garment, all the way down to your underwear. And the suggestion is to keep a clothes basket near the door. And not only should we take off the shoe, but we should spray the shoe as well, bottom and top. That's real testimony coming out of an area living in a community with COVID-19.
All right.
It might be difficult to ask visitors to do this, right?
So limit the visitors.
So if we can provide them with some sort of gown, I guess that would help. But I tell you something, the idea is to wash that garment, right? So if you live in a home, as you say, it's very important that you have some receptacle to put these garments and then you wash them, all right?
Because we must remember that the virus can, for a short period of time, be on the garments as well. So you don't want to take that into the house. So it's best to find a way of leaving it at the door. Don't just rush to the kitchen or other parts in the house in the same street clothes. It's best to leave them at the door.
All right. I'll take 2 more questions from in studio, and then I'll take 2 more questions from our online participants.
Okay, my question is, well, there's an activity I like to do called pool aerobics. So it's not a public gathering, 10 to 15 people, but I would want to know is if there are infected persons there, would chlorine be sufficient to kill the virus, or it's better to just avoid that completely?
May I say that most of these infections are caused by close contact. I don't think we should become so fearful that if you don't come in contact with a known case, that you have to go all out, you know, to combat against this infection. You take the necessary precaution. I don't know what happens at the aerobics. Are people close together? Not really. Yeah. So most of the infections that you have seen so far is because of close contact. If you have been following, it's like family members who have contracted this and they pass it on to another family member, or even at this funeral where people tend to get close and they hug each other, you know? So most of the infection we have seen so far is by way of close contact.
And just to add, the virus is an envelope virus, or usual chloride, hydrogen peroxide, usual disinfectant should be able to kill the viruses. I'm thinking that chlorine should have an effect on the virus because it's an envelope virus, so the common agents that we use should be effective against them.
If I might just add to it, it's very sensitive once they have this lipid bilayer. Okay, it's not like the polio virus, which is classed as a naked virus. That virus can live for a long time. But this is why the respiratory virus, once you swallow it and goes into the stomach, it is destroyed by the acidic condition that exists in the stomach, okay? So anything can actually kill ether, chloroform, and just a number of disinfectants.
But it's important to remember that the portals of entry are the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So if you are within 6 feet or 2 meters of anyone who coughs or sneezes, if they are infected with the virus, some of the droplets will drop into the water and be destroyed. However, your mucous membrane, your epithelial lining of the mucous membrane, once the virus gets in there, then there is increased risk for infection. So the question that Doc asked about how close you are to each other, it's very, very important. Because if you are within close enough range that the respiratory droplets can come in contact with your mucosal lining then the risk of infection exists. And that's important to bear in mind when you decide to do whatever activity it is that you would normally carry on before the entrance of this virus to our shores, and know that you are aware that it is here and we have local spread. All right. One more question, and then I'll take.
Good night, all. My question to Dr. Phillips. What are some of the behavioral changes you have seen in young people towards this crisis? What are some of the behavioral changes that you have seen in young people towards this crisis?
I don't know if I would single out young people. I know that there is always the tendency to become panicked, to kind of, we've seen them panic buying, we've seen persons, become very fearful in the face of this pandemic. And it is understandable, but at the same time, we have to realize that, one, it's not a death sentence. And so because you've contracted the virus, that doesn't automatically mean that you're going to die. And two, that once we take our precautions, there's good information out there. Once we take our precautions, then we'll be able to adequately protect ourselves. Outside of just worrying, we'll be able to adequately protect ourselves and ensure that at the end of the day we remain safe and we keep our loved ones safe as well.
Might I say that our young people need to avail themselves to all the ads that are put out there. Because once you don't know you're going to behave a certain way, that seems very strange. And we have seen on the television that even in Goshen, Clarendon, that the taxis, they were passing the people by because they understand that there was a visitor visiting a certain person, and could be spread that way. And one lady was standing for like 2 hours. They just passed. Some of our taxis are not even picking up nurses. And I think it's because of lack of education or refuse to listen to the various media that would promote this sort of education.
And that is why sensitization is very good. We have to sensitize members of the community so they know what obtains, they know how this virus is transmitted and how to avoid it. So people are not stigmatized if they're found to be infected.
True.
And I would like to add to that, that there is this whole plethora of information. I think that most people are overwhelmed, so we have to get community members to take information from credible sources.
That's
the
true.
Ministry of Health and Wellness, World Health Organization, Center for Disease Control. Those are some of the credible means of information.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because even one body, I won't mention the name, which is a recognized body, they were actually putting out there that the virus cannot be transmitted by the air, okay? And they were actually putting exact times that these viruses would survive. I can't see anybody at this state, at this time, having done that sort of research to know that the virus will remain for 12 hours or for 5 days. We don't know this yet. And remember that these statistics are for these temperate climates where the virus can live for a longer time in wet, damp, humid conditions.
So there's opportunity for research in Jamaica.
Yes. All right, I'll take one more question, a burning question from our audience.
Countries of the world are suffering so much when this virus peaks. How will the effect in Jamaica be, seeing that our government has projected that over 2 million of our people may come infected? Do we have the necessary materials or equipments to help our people?
All right, thank you. Good question. I'd like to attempt to answer, but I'll give my panel a chance to go ahead first.
We know that in Jamaica, our healthcare system is definitely not the best. This is a system that is already overburdened, and already struggling to handle the capacity of our diseases that we have now, diabetes, hypertension. All of those put a strain on our healthcare system. No doubt coronavirus as well will put a strain on our healthcare system. But with good information, we can combat this, and we'll be able to, in some way, handle it. One of the most important points that Dr. Brown pointed out tonight was that the recovery rate for coronavirus is actually pretty high. It's usually, based on the research that is coming out by day 6, you will be able to kind of assess whether or not it is either that you recover or there may be deterioration by that day, right? So that is why the advice given out is not to come to the health center or to the hospital when you have symptoms. You call the Ministry of Health with the various numbers that they've given out in an effort not to overburden the system and to protect healthcare workers as well. So not everybody needs to come into hospital. Not everybody needs to come to the health center. However, it's important that we do this because, as she mentioned, there are 15% who will be critically ill and 5% who will go on to have serious issues. If our healthcare system is overburdened by those persons who are either asymptomatic or have mild disease, then those people may be lost in a crowd and instead of recovering, may meet their demise. So it's important for us to be educated about coronavirus, to know that, as I said, it's not a death sentence, and that 80% will actually recover. And a lot of persons may not need medical attention in terms of attending a health center or hospital.
And the Minister of Health gave some assurances that they are actually retrofitting some of our hospitals, creating more space. They recognize the need that they're going to need more ICU beds. And we also learned that 21 nurses will be coming in from Cuba during this week. And we have the support of the Pan American Health Organization that is helping the country in terms of its readiness.
I believe we have an aging population in Jamaica. And so I believe that we should be more concerned, not that we shouldn't be concerned about everybody, but more so the elderlies, who would have been subjected to so many problems during their lifetime and some of these debilitating diseases. So we have to be concerned about that group. It's just about 15 to 20% that this group will fall in. All right, so just remember that we, as you say, be our brother's keeper and try to help the elderly among us.
All right.
Just another question, because I recognize that some doctors, and Ms. Henry is there now, and you guys mostly deal with the science. And I want to see from my church the belief in the Word of God. When these diseases was in Egypt, where were God's people? God's people were in Goshen. They were protected. Some of the times I'm wondering, do we truly trust the Word of God? Or do we trust the science more? Because this must be something that is very important. If we are believers in God, then we're going to make sure that God comes before the science. But in most of our countries, and when we look over the world, when Nebuchadnezzar was in problem, or Pharaoh, they called the astrologers and the scientists and all these people. Now we see the same thing over our country and over the world. Where is that which is God?
We haven't neglected that any at all. And as such, we will have a short presentation on the spiritual perspective, and it's outlined in our program. So we have not neglected that, and we intend to address that as well. Because before we became doctors, we were children of Christ, and we cannot in no way, form, or fashion neglect that. That's paramount important, and that's why the function is here and not anywhere else. And we're presenting the scientific fact, but we have not neglected any at all the spiritual perspective, and we'll be having a presentation on that in short order. Just give us a little time. Also, just to add to your first point, the goal of the Ministry of Health at this point is to flatten the curve. Once you have an infection, there's usually a rising to a peak and then it comes back down. And based on the stage that we are, our goal is to flatten that peak so we don't have as many people getting infected. Hence the measures that are put in place at this point based on where we are as it relates to closing schools, as it relates to emphasizing your personal hygiene, as it relates to emphasizing the importance of taking care of others, as it relates to not having mass gatherings or congregations or groupings. And so that is why at this point in time, these measures are implemented so that we can decrease the impact on the health services that are available. The truth is that we're quickly running out of time. And as informative and good as the presentation is and all the questions that are coming in, based on what I'm seeing, we have covered most of the information for the questions that are coming in that we've addressed already and that has come in from the studio audience. So ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go on at this point to the spiritual perspective that will be given by our Jamaica Union Conference representative, Dr. Dudley Hossein. And then after that, we will have prayer and vote of thanks.
May I just say something though before she comes?
Sure.
That you can make your own sanitizers. All you need is some aloe vera, okay, and a 70% alcohol. It's about 1 part of the aloe vera to about 3 parts of the alcohol. So don't worry about not getting this in the stores.
I thank you, panelists. You may exit at this time, and we'll segue into the presentation from Dr. Hossein.
Those online, those are the church. Feedback right here, which is a little bit deafening for me. Things from the Jamaica Union Conference of Seventh-day Adventists and Pastor Everett Brown, Pastor Merrick Walker, or Pastor Barwise. Thank you all for hosting this event at the Great and Seventh Adventist Church. Well, God's protective care. This says that this is composed of 2 characters. One represents danger and the other represents opportunity. To trust in God at this time. Indeed, it's an opportunity we have this time of crisis to make God our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. The psalmist says in Psalm 46, 1-3, God is present tense and strength, a very present help in trouble. The text says we should not fear whatever happens. It's proven to be trustworthy. He's able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think according to the power that works in us. Refuge. He is our shelter, our protection from danger. He's our strength in the midst of challenges. It's in Philippians 4, verse 13. All things through Christ who strengthened me. Is able. So I just want to remind you all that God is able. So we should not Let us not fear. And I like what one of the presenters said earlier. 2 Timothy 1, verse 7. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of love and of power and of a sound mind. We should help in this time of crisis. But of course, the natural thing is to panic, to fear, to think about what will happen. We have to always remember that God is large and God is in charge of everything. That's one thing in this time of crisis we should remember. We have this opportunity to trust God, to exhibit calmness in this situation, that He takes care of us. So we have an opportunity to inspire others to maintain that level of calmness. Isaiah 26, verse 3. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. God, to minister. So as we trust God, we exhibit calmness. In fact, even that text, Psalm 46:10, that we must be still and know that God is God. Is to and very much concerned and be worried about what will happen. But we can trust God because we know that He has taken care of His people in time past. Of life. We know that, as the writer to the Hebrews says in Hebrews 13, verse 8, He is the same yesterday, today. So we know that the prophecies are fulfilling. What the Bible says is coming to pass. In fact, Jesus says in Luke 21:26, men's heart failed them for fear and looking at those things coming on the earth. So when folks are fearful, we can help them to see the brighter side of life, to look at it from a different perspective, and understand that we can exercise faith in God to protect us. Of course, we have to practice all the protocols and observe all the laws of health and do our part to protect ourselves. But we have to trust God. And as we continue to trust Him, He will continue to take care of us. There's one text that gives me comfort every day, Matthew 28, verse 20. Jesus reminds us, lo, I'm with you always, even till the end of the age. And we must fact that He's not like Judas that will betray us, and Peter that will deny us, and even Demas that will forsake us. Sticks closer than a brother, so we can trust Him. He'll be within us to strengthen us, to uphold us before us, to direct us, beside us, to comfort us. That's why we just need to take more time for prayer. It's a call to prayer, a call to link with God. We should exhibit that calmness, that peacefulness. Take knowledge that we have been with Jesus. So we must be messengers of hope. Get some false news and they share it, and they become alarmists. But we should, we're sharing is from authentic sources, World Health Organization, CDC, and other sources. And as we share, we have to be responsible, be positive, of what the Bible says, individuals, that God is in control of everything, and all things work together for good. We know, as the Bible says, that there shall be famine, earthquakes in various places, pestilences. We know that this is one of them, and we just allow things to happen and take this opportunity to witness. And we know the gospel must go forward. Matthew 24, verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached into all the world for a witness unto all nations. Then, so in the midst of this crisis, we can witness us soon, because all these things happening are telling us that Jesus Christ to wind this thing up. And there's a song that we oftentimes sing in church. Lift up the trumpet and Lord, let it ring. Jesus is coming again. Now it's time for the Lord to come. Heaven are growing dim. It must be the breaking of the day. So I'm excited. Challenge to weakness. You know, somebody met me at the store and, you know, I was trying my best to be calm and Christian, that's what gives you hope. And I told the person, with Jesus gives me hope, my faith in God. This time, and I'm not worried because God is in control. In all these things, we're more than conquerors. So we should look at the brighter side, trusting God, and doing our part to observe the laws of health. And also it's an opportunity for us to share the health message, the principles of a healthy lifestyle. You know, we can do a lot to share as it relates to the New Start Dr. Heslop mentioned. You know, as we share that, folks can have better immune systems and they can be stronger, better able to resist this deadly virus. So we can share the health message, leading individuals back to the principles of style, teaching them to embrace. And we know that as they do that, they can be stronger and live longer. This can be an entering wedge also to really share the message for this time, the three angels' messages. So we should be messengers of hope, sharing lifestyle, sharing the prophecies, sharing the word of God, reminding folk that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Sharing Psalm 46, 1-3. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Dear
ladies and gentlemen, what an amazing success this conference has been. It was thoroughly educational and enlightening. So on behalf of the leadership of the Brayton Seventh-day Adventist Church, please allow me to express appreciation to all who contributed in different ways to the success of this conference. To Ms. Thesia Kelly and Mrs. Tanika White Groves for advising us of the financial impact this virus can have. Thank you for the information you gave. To our moderator, Dr. Sidian Brady Brown, thank you for taking on the task of leading out. Members of the panel, thank you for the insights and responses in alleviating the fears of this novel coronavirus. To our greetings that came to us from the Central Jamaica Conference, we say thank you. To all our sponsors who contributed to this evening's program, Central Jamaica Conference, Nestle, Chazzy Ramson, ProSWAT, Kirk Distributors, Ricardo Stationery and Supplies, we could not have done this without you. To the advertising agencies and media houses, OOH Media, NCU Media, TBC Radio, JIS and Radio Jamaica, thank you. We want to say thanks also to the health team here at Brayton Seventh-day Adventist Church, headed by Elder Randall Williams, to the communications and technical teams, our ushers, decorators, and everyone who played their part in making this conference a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, our online viewers and listeners, thank you for being such a gracious audience. To our guest presenters, I left them for last because we have something special for them. So don't think I had forgotten you. Dr. Michelle Brown and Dr. Orville Heslop for sharing and informing us of the effects of this virus, the hows, the preventions, the do's and don'ts. And I'm sure from the knowledge that we gained here, we are all better prepared to protect ourselves, our loved ones, and each other. May I invite Mrs. Dion Henry, who came to us from Central Jamaica Conference, as we give you a little token of our appreciation. It's all hands off, so please forgive us for not shaking hands. Dr. Michelle Brown, please come and let me give you a little token as well. Dr. Heslop, it's now your time. You have benefited. I have benefited. Let us all do what we can to keep coronavirus out of our space. Thank you. At this time, I'll invite Mrs. Henry to do our closing prayer.
May I invite us to stand? Let us pray. Father in heaven, we give you thanks for our deliberation here this evening. We thank you for the many resources that you have blessed us with as a church, and we thank you for the many partners that you have carried into our space to enrich this evening's deliberations. Lord, we pray that those who have listened and have heard, they will find the information so useful that they will begin some form of behavior change so that we can reduce the impact of this virus that has now entered into our country. Dear God, we are leaving here with the assurance that you're giving us that you still reign, and therefore we can trust you. And we thank you for that assurance in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, I would just want to, I'm not answering, no problem. Just to thank you all for having been here. I hope you will continue the message of preparation, prevention. All the good stuff that has gone on this evening will help somebody, I'm sure. We'll have a few minutes, we can talk a little to one another, but we'll keep your distance as we talk. Practice what we have learned. She's done. Oh, she's wrapping up. Okay. Didn't tell me.
Thanks for joining us for a COVID-19 conference. We hope you were informed. Dr. Michelle Brown took us through an overview of COVID-19 and gave us tips as it relates to combating the virus. Dr. Heslop previewed us on the characteristics of the family and coronaviruses to which COVID-19 is a part. Our panelists have answered your questions competently, and we thank them. With all the info that we have received, together we can fight to keep ourselves and our community safe. Stay tuned for updates from the Brayton Seventh-day Adventist Church via our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, at Brayton Seventh-day Adventist Church. Download our mobile app available in the Google Play Store or Apple Store. That's a wrap from the COVID-19 conference. Do stay tuned and have a good night.
The government of Jamaica is prepared to deal with the occurrence of the novel coronavirus COVID-19 in Jamaica.
concerns for healthcare workers who have to be in contact with persons who are placed in quarantine facilities.